Thank you, Mr Speaker. And a bit of a unique twist. I actually don't have an amendment to move. I was just intending to speak to the motion. But having said that, not entirely sure what iteration of the motion I'm speaking to, so I'll speak in generalities about the basic premise of the motion. And in so doing, Mr Speaker, do support the member for Mount Gambier's attempt. I've got that. I do support the member for Mount Gambier's intention to recognise that the assistance that professional and recreational fishers play, but also, more specifically, I guess, to highlight a gap in the sea rescue puzzle that we've got, and he has highlighted the Port Macdonald and South East gap there and made arguments as to why that is the most needy place. Now, whilst I do support the essence of the motion, I would argue that perhaps he's missed the most needy of all destinations on our coastline, Mr Speaker, that being Point Turton. And I've made a number of representations to both the previous and current government about how we might fix that gap. And members may or may not be aware that quite some years ago, the Point Turton Royal Volunteer Coastal Patrol went out and of their own volition managed to secure a vessel that they intended to use to help make rescues in the waters off of Point Turton. They got off their own backsides and went out and made sure that they had access to a vessel, and in so doing filled a significant gap. There's no other sea rescue opportunities between Port Victoria, all the way around to Edithburgh, which is significant coastline and quite some more distance by boat, and a very popular fishing and tourism destination at the bottom of the peninsula. So they got off their backside and did that, but in so doing ran into the wrath of the bureaucracy, who condemned their vessel for being too old, I think because it had a diesel engine, but I stand to be corrected on that, and limited it to 1 nautical mile offshore, which, not being a boater myself, but I'm led to believe that's not where the most of the rescues occur. They occur a bit further out, and if you are 1 nautical mile offshore, you might well find yourself a bit easier to get back to the shore. So I would argue that's the most needy destination on our coastline, Mr Speaker. That would, perhaps I should amend the motion to include that. It is the most needy, but yeah, I hope that in considering the motion as this is put forward to the House, that the government also considers other destinations like Point Turton, which have been the subject of numerous submissions from me. I've suggested to the government, I know that most retiring vessels are sold to subsidise the cost of the incoming vessel, but the Wallaroo vessel, which admittedly is in a different squadron, that's a sea rescue as opposed to the Royal Volunteer Coastal Patrol, but I know that's due for its periodic changeover. That's due for an upgrade this financial year, I think. Perhaps when that vessel's retired, it might find its way to Point Turton, where it could be used by those volunteers down there to help to achieve what they want to do. They've got a healthy membership, they've got a willingness to help. All they need is permission from the bureaucracy or a new boat to be able to do that. So here's hoping that in this motion passing, it can trigger that action and we can get that gap filled. Now, Mr Speaker, the other point I wanted to make in talking today was that I'd like to highlight another part of the motion that perhaps hasn't been the subject of such vigorous debate thus far, and that is that, in essence, this House is asked to recognise the importance of professional and recreational fishers. Now, Mr Speaker, that's no more apparent than it is than in my seat, on both a gulf on each side, where numerous people make their living off of fishing. And it has been an industry, the marine scale fishery, that has been the subject of some hardship over the past 5 years. And prior to the 2018 election, both parties committed to reforming the fishery and implementing a quota system, and it was done. It was a painful process for some as the adjustment occurred, and a number of fishermen had to exit or chose to exit the industry. They weren't awarded enough quota, or they decided that might be an opportune time for retirement, or for whatever reason. So quite a painful experience for a number of people, but there are a number of valuable community contributors that remain in the fishery that are doing a wonderful job, who have just been informed by this government that their licence fees will be hiked. So in addition to having gone through that extremely painful process of quota implementation, they've received notice recently that their licence fees will be hiked. And I'd like to give a couple of examples of real-world businesses and how it will affect them. I was contacted from one gentleman who fishes near the bottom of the peninsula. His current licence fees are about $5,940. He projects that his licence fees for the next financial year will be $31,903. So that's a 400% increase on top of what he was paying already. Another business called me I don't have such specific numbers for this one, but he estimates his current licence fees are around $7,000 and that they will climb to about $30,000 in the next financial year. Now, that second business reports a $50,000 taxable income. So when your licence fees make up approximately 30 grand of a fixed $50,000 taxable income, you can see how that might threaten the viability of that business. So after quite some time, 5 years of hardship and being kicked repeatedly in the lower abdomen, we somehow have come back to kicking the same industry again and again. And the reason for that, in my view, is that because South Australia is the only state which imposes a cost recovery model on their professional fishermen. So the marine scale fishers in South Australia, unlike every other state in this country, are funding the entire cost of the industry and the bureaucracy. That is not sustainable, and it was barely sustainable when we had heaps more fishermen in the industry previous to the buyouts and quota implementation, but now that there's significantly less, that it's even more of a burden on those that have remained to fund the entire industry. So this is my call in recognising the importance that professional and professional fishermen play in our state in emergency marine situations and all other parts of community life. Now is the time to change and move away from a cost recovery model. We don't have the critical mass of fishermen there to fund it. They are doing their best to make ends meet as it is. Imposing significant licence fee hikes, like the two examples that I've read out previous, is just not a sustainable model, and I would urge the government to move away from that as soon as possible. There are other ways to do it, and one that I consider to be attractive, and I'm not putting this forward as the only option, but one that I consider to be attractive is that the fishermen could be charged a percentage of their gross value product. They could be charged a percentage of their GVP, like is done in WA. Now, this would mean that they pay for what they use, essentially. They're funding the product that they catch, and it would be a more equitable way of ensuring that they are those businesses, which are, as I said, struggling to make ends meet, remain viable, can continue to contribute to our communities, and that they can also continue to supply our restaurants and our pubs and our fish markets with fresh fish, which I know the vast majority of this House thoroughly enjoys. So here is my call to the Parliament in recognising the importance of professional fishermen to make change, to move away from the cost recovery model and to start helping this fishery rather than kicking it, because it's been a long 5 years for them, and now is the time that we can change and move away from that cost recovery model. So in so doing, I've had cause to talk to quite a number of fishermen over the past couple of weeks about this, and just by way of warning to both sides of the House, one argument that really wears thin with people on the ground is when parties blame previous governments for mistakes. Now, I'm sure it happens after every election. It's not an indictment on anyone. It's just the fact of life that once you're in government, people want to see the problem solved, not blame apportioned to particular parties. So here we have a problem that needs solving. Hopefully the government is up to it. I know that there's been a report prepared and in the Minister's possession about options moving away from cost recovery. Hopefully we see that report soon and we move away from, and we see that report soon and we present it with options that might be better suited for our fishery, but something needs to change, and sooner rather than later would be better. So there's my plea, and focusing on a different part of the motion and acknowledging the importance that professional fishermen play, but also making sure that we have another call out for a boat or rescue vessel at Point Turton. And it's well past time, and those wonderful volunteers are getting quite desperate to ensure that they have the proper equipment provided to them.
Member for Charles.